Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Wisconsin chapter of the Wildlife Society's Brown Bag webinar series. My name is Allie Scott, and I will be facilitating today's webinar. And so before we get started, I'd like to share a few announcements. So we're really excited because the 2023 annual winter meeting will be held in person this year. And so you can join us January 31st to February 2nd at the Radisson Hotel in La Crosse. And so the call for abstracts is currently open and it closes on December 22nd. So you have some time to get those ready to submit. So the Wisconsin chapter has also opened nominations for chapter leadership positions. And so the executive board is looking for candidates for president-elect, treasurer, and board member at large. And applications are due December 22nd. If you know someone who isn't a member of the Wisconsin chapter, you can actually give them a free one-year membership through our Give Back program. And so don't forget to nominate your peers and colleagues for this awesome opportunity. We've also launched a brand new event page on the Wisconsin chapter website. And so you can bookmark this page to stay up to date on our chapter events, on various committee meetings so that you can get involved and all the other great things that are going on. And so finally, this webinar is being recorded and it'll be available soon on our YouTube page. And so you can find this and past recordings of our webinars there. And I will put a link to all those resources in the chat. And so with that, we can move on to our topic and to our speakers for today. And so the title of today's webinar is Wisconsin's Green Fire, Partnership Opportunities in Wildlife. And so we're really lucky to have Tom Hauge, Paul Heinen, and Jenny Washam to present on this topic. And so Tom Hauge retired from the DNR after serving 24 years as the Wildlife Management Program Director. And during his 37-year career in wildlife conservation, Tom gained firsthand experience with the changing Wisconsin landscape from both a literal habitat perspective and in the context of social and political change. He serves as a founding board member of Wisconsin's Green Fire, and he now co-chairs the Wildlife Work Group. Paul Heinen has served as a Wisconsin Green Fire Legislative Liaison for the past 4 years. And before that, he was a Legislative Liaison for the DNR for 34 years and the Nature Conservancy for 4 years after that. And finally, Jenny Washam is the Communications and Outreach Coordinator for Wisconsin's Green Fire. Jenny has been involved with Wisconsin's Green Fire and the Aspiring Conservation Professionals Work Group since the fall of 2020, joining the staff of the organization in 2021. Jenny is a recent graduate with a master's degree in environmental conservation from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and a bachelor's degree in conservation biology from North Carolina State University. She holds experience in the intersection between conservation science, policy, and communication. And so after the presentation today, we will have time for audience Q&A. So throughout the talk, please put any questions you have in the chat and we will address them at the end. And so welcome, Tom, Paul, and Jenny, and I will turn it over to you for your presentation.
Well, thank you very much. Jenny is the commander of this 3-person crew, and she said I have to go first. So I do everything that Jenny says. But greetings to our Wisconsin chapter of the Wildlife Society partners out there over your lunch hour, and thanks for having us today. We'd kind of like to do our talk in sort of 3 parts. I'm going to try to give you an overview of Wisconsin Green Fire as well as Wisconsin Green Fire's Wildlife Work Group. We'd like to introduce you to our efforts to help young professionals. And then we will also be giving you a 50,000-foot view of Wisconsin's political landscape, which should be a current events type thing given the election of yesterday. You heard a little bit about my background. The only thing I would add to that is that I have been a chapter member for about 45 years. I don't stretch all the way back to the origin of the Wisconsin chapter, but not far behind. And I do plan to be there in person at the 50th anniversary celebration up in La Crosse. And Jenny, next slide, please. Well, Wisconsin's Green Fire is a young organization as far as conservation organizations in Wisconsin go.
Well, that's true.
This month, we will be observing our 5th anniversary, and we're having a celebration. And Paul Heinen, also our party man, he is in charge of that operation, and it's got a good program lined up. I know it doesn't quite live up to 50 years of the TWS chapter, but anyway, we're trying to make our mark. I would say that we formed out of concern over what we saw as a disconnect between natural resource policy making and decisions here in Wisconsin and the science of natural resources conservation. I'm not going to read the text on the screen. I think you guys can handle that okay, but that's kind of what brought us together 5 years ago. Next slide, Jenny. Our Wisconsin Green Fire, we work to make sure that the best available science is being considered in the decision-making that goes on in the state. And I would say our focus has been primarily at the state level, but that we're not limited to that. We do weigh in on federal issues, particularly those issues that are of importance to Wisconsin's conservation efforts. And we are not shy at all at working at the county level and local level if there's important matters that we need to be engaged in. I think we all know that conservation isn't free, and Green Fire works to create the needed funding to do that conservation, whether it be in the form of license fee increases or other streams of funding that can help with that mission. We show up. Our members are regular attendees at either Natural Resources Board meetings, legislative hearings, and other forums, trying to bring that science to the table for the decision makers. And maybe the newest plank in our efforts is building programs for young aspiring conservationists. And Jenny is going to be talking more about that after I've finished here. Next slide, please. So this is a photo commemorating our very first annual meeting that took place up in the Aldo Leopold Foundation. Some notables, Tia Nelson, Stan Temple, Fred Clark, a whole bunch of different folks from a whole bunch of different natural resource disciplines. We currently have about 600 some members in Green Fire, and we're hoping that all of you that are participating in this brown bag will think about joining our ranks. We don't share our membership lists if that's a concern to anybody currently working, and whether or not we are sensitive to the employer-employee relationship, and we know what it means sometimes when you might have to be critical of or take a position that doesn't align exactly with your employer's stance on that. I don't think you have to worry about Green Fire saying so-and-so said this is wrong or anything like that. That's not going to happen. What is not in this slideshow, but I want to mention is we also have a science council that is composed of experts in many disciplines, but their purpose is to sort of be an advisory body to the board of Green Fire on sort of the policy decisions and maybe priorities for our organization going forward. Next slide. You can kind of put our work into three broad buckets. We work to develop policy recommendations. We are active in terms of trying to engage the public, as well as this building generational expertise. So probably the bulk of our work is in that first bucket in terms of being focused on conservation policies. As I said earlier, the bulk of it is at the state level, but we also work, say, at the county level, where we recently were engaged with Monroe County, helping them build a plan that would make them better positioned for the climate changes that we're facing right now and that are to come. We do host webinars, and we do host field trips to increase public participation. Next slide, please. We have 11 work groups at the current time. These are not etched in stone. If there are good cause for other work groups to form, they can. I would say that also from a WTS perspective, 3 of these work groups are co-chaired by WTS chapter members. Adrian Whiteavin and myself co-chair the wildlife work group. Mike Meyer co-chairs the climate change work group, and Ron Eckstein co-chairs the public land and forestry work group. And I dare say there are probably chapter members that are sprinkled throughout these other work groups as well. We do form ad hoc, I'll call them issue groups. We don't have a formal name for them, as needed when there are items of concern that need our attention. In the wildlife world, a couple examples are working on lead poisoning types of issues in fishing and hunting, well, fishing tackle, hunting ammunition, or injured wildlife. That's another area of concern for us, particularly injured wildlife issues that are of human origin. We're trying to see what we can do to sort of help on that side of the equation. And I sort of mentioned the Science Council already, and I guess Jenny will go to the next one. Well, of course, we had the COVID pandemic in the middle of these 5 years, and so scenes like this are relatively uncommon in terms of the wildlife work group, but this is a scene from an earlier Wisconsin chapter of the Wildlife Society meeting. I think this was in central Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken, where the work group was able to get together. As I mentioned, Adrian co-chairs this group with me. We got over 40 members, and I have members in quotations because really it's an email list is what it is. And that are members who said that they have an interest in the wildlife side of things. Will get updates from myself or communications. And if we're working on a project, if they are interested in it, feel they can contribute in it, they are all welcome to do so. Most of our work has been via email or Zoom style meetings. We are planning on having an in-person meeting in conjunction with the TWS meeting this winter. We are also hoping, and we will be, I guess I'm going to confirm that we will be a gold level sponsor of that January meeting. Again, a good diversity of folks from different entities and backgrounds participating in this group. Next slide, Jenny. Well, as I indicated looking at Greenfire as a whole, the bulk of our work has occurred in the policy arena. On top, those are three of the major publications that our work group has spent a lot of time on. And Opportunities Now publication on meeting Wisconsin's deer conservation challenges, where we outline what we saw as the 5 major challenges facing Wisconsin's deer conservation programs. Wolves, trying to create a shared vision for wolves in Wisconsin and reviewing that issue, giving it good in depth, and we wanted to have that done to serve as a prelude to the wolf management plan that the department was beginning to update. And then we also weighed in with what we call a conservation bulletin that gave a preliminary assessment of the impact of the winter February 2021 wolf harvest. And so we spend a lot of time reviewing agency plans, in this case, primarily Department of Natural Resources, whether they be species management plans or harvest management plans. We are also concerned about funding. I don't know if that slide can be raised, Jenny, but probably doesn't matter. We have served on the leadership committee of the Wisconsin RAWA Coalition, working hard to get that important national funding through to be the third leg of the, I guess, the sort of fish and wildlife pillar of funding, which could potentially deliver $18 million a year to Wisconsin for work of species of special conservation concern and other species. And also we are actively involved in the review of legislation that's coming down the pike and trying to submit comments. We also serve on DNR advisory committees. We've been on the wolf committee, or we are on the wolf committee. We've served on the rough grouse and the prairie chicken management plan committees. Next slide. The second bucket in terms of engaging the public on wildlife conservation issues. Again, webinars has been probably the tool of choice, but we are also been engaged in terms of sort of the fun side, getting together with people, conservation social series. Here you see Jeff Wilson and Linda Parker that were gathered for one of our northern gatherings and entertained by Jeff's very rich stories of his career as a wildlife biologist for the Department of Natural Resources. We are also working hard, as many conservation organizations are, to diversify not only our membership, but our communication and working with other partners. We participated along with the chapter at the recent Native American Fish and Wildlife Society conference. So we'll move on, one more. This is really just a transition slide to set up Jenny's part of the talk, but the Wildlife Work Group did have the opportunity this year to engage with Greenfire's overall mission of building and supporting the next generation of professionals. We had the opportunity to work with Abby Achtenhagen, who was working on her master's degree in the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies out of Madison. She was able to, or we were able to work with the department to allow Abby to gain access to 5 years worth of deer harvest data. And she took a in-depth, deep dive look at the deer harvest data for 3 counties, one in Northern Forest, Central Forest, and in the Southern farmland areas. And between myself and Tim Van Deelen and few other folks, we were able to serve as mentors and coaches to Abby as she conducted that analysis and successfully presented her her work for the master's degree. So that's kind of my launch part, and I'll turn it over to Jenny to take it to the next circle.
All right, thanks, Tom. So as Ali said at the beginning, my name is Jenny Washam. I have been involved with Greenfire since the fall of 2020, when I was a grad student at UW-Madison and was really looking for ways to get plugged into the conservation community in Wisconsin. And it was kind of in the middle of the pandemic, and I wasn't really able to get out and do in-person networking. So I was able to connect with Greenfire and get plugged in, and it's really opened a lot of doors for me. So the way that I really got plugged in was through the Aspiring Conservation Professionals Work Group, or ACP for short. That's a really long title. This work group is a little bit different from the other 10 work groups that Tom was describing earlier. Our mission is really to create a community of aspiring conservation professionals within Wisconsin, and connect them with each other and with other professionals within Wisconsin's Greenfire and within the Wisconsin conservation community. So you can see our mission here, and we've really grown from a very small group of us in the fall of 2020 to a much broader network of students and aspiring professionals across the state. And we really want to open it up not only to students and quote unquote younger professionals, but also anyone who is really just getting involved within conservation field, and they really want to learn what's open to them within the conservation field. Our work really centers around 3 pillars. The first being personal growth via co-leadership and mentorship. So as I mentioned, we really want to bridge that connection between students and younger professionals and our more seasoned professionals within Wisconsin's Greenfire, and foster that co-learning and two-way learning between those 2 groups. And we also encourage co-leadership. So our work group is made up of officers who lead different aspects of our work. So we have a chair, we have a secretary and a career development coordinator, and then a newsletter editor. So each of those folks really lead the charge on those different areas. And then we have a few advisors who are older members of Greenfire who really guide us on our projects and what we work on throughout the year. Additionally, we also encourage professional contribution to other work groups within Greenfire and the broader conservation community. So as Tom was explaining earlier, we've had a lot of ACP work group members work on our Opportunities Now policy papers, as well as other work group projects like Abby that Tom was explaining. So that's something that we really encourage with our membership. And then finally, we also produce our own content. So we have a biannual newsletter, electronic newsletter that goes out to our ACP members and folks on our mailing lists called Conservation Connections. And then our members also help manage Wisconsin's Greenfire social media. So that's Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. And that's been a huge help for me trying to get that off the ground in the last year. So just some specific examples of these 3 different pillars. First is mentorship. So we have really built off of this idea of mutual learning and a personal story. Back when I was first joining Greenfire in the fall of 2020, like I said, I really wanted to get plugged in with the conservation community, and Dolly Ledeen, who's pictured on the left in the middle, who's one of our advisors. She's connected with almost everybody in Wisconsin, it seems. She connected me with Adrian Weideben, and we were able to have some conversations around my interests in wolf biology, and through that conversation and through other connections with folks at the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, I was able to find my summer capstone project for my master's with Glickwick, and then connected with Greenfire as well for a full-time job later that year. So it's been a really cool way to get to know fellow conservation professionals, young and old, within Wisconsin. And there have been other success stories like that within our group, and we're hoping that more are to come in the years to come. This is just some examples of ACP members who have contributed to our work. You can see their names starred here. They contributed to our Waters of the United States policy paper, and then our energy policy paper. And most recently, we had Ellen Wagner at UW-Madison contribute to our imbalance of power paper about Wisconsin's broken environmental rulemaking process, which maybe Paul can talk about a little bit later. But it's been cool to see that overlap and that really cool plug-in and involvement with our members and the Wisconsin's Greenfire as a whole. And then finally, this is our Conservation Connections newsletter. The fall 2022 version will be going out later, hopefully within the next week. But within this, it features different work group activities that have been going on, highlights Greenfire activities. I have on here a reflection written by Cheyenne Eustace, who is a student at Northland College and was mentored by Clayton Russell, who's up in the Ashland area. And that was kind of our model that we set for establishing the mentorship program. And then I also did an interview with Peter David, who is one of my mentors at Glickwick, there on the right, about his experience working with the tribes. So we have different features and interviews of groups around the state doing great work too. So yeah, there's opportunities to sign up for that newsletter as well on our website. So to kind of round out this, just some opportunities for collaboration. Tom kind of briefly went over this, but like he said, we will be at the winter meeting in January and hope to really connect with members of the Wildlife Society there. We recently attended the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society meeting and facilitated that discussion with Allie on cross-cultural partnerships. So that was a great time and definitely something that we want to continue. And I do think that our mentorship program is a great opportunity for collaboration with the Wisconsin chapter, just because of our membership overlap and connecting students within Greenfire with Wisconsin chapter members and vice versa. So if you're interested in learning more about the work group, you can visit our website there. I have the link, and you can sign up for our newsletter. And if you're interested in mentorship, there's also a survey that you can fill out, and we can pair you with the right person. So with that, I will turn it over to Paul for a brief election overview. So thank you.
Thanks, Jen. One of the major things that Greenfire does is affect policy at the state capitol. Tom talked about the fact we do some at the national level, but mainly at the state capitol. And without being too much of a braggart, we are really one of the major leading groups in terms of working with the governor's office and DNR, the legislature, when the legislature wants to work, the Natural Resources Board, because we have 700 plus people who wrote the laws, lived those policies, and want to continue to, as Tom says, be really involved in the protection and enhancement of our natural resources. And of course, if we're going to do that, we need to be playing in the political arena. We are completely nonpartisan. If you're a Republican and wants to do something good for the environment, we're there. If you're a Democrat, we're there. If you're a Libertarian, it makes no difference. The fact of the matter is, we're going to use our science to inform the legislators and the governor's office and the Department of Natural Resources on the top issues that Tom was talking about. And you can throw in climate change and PFAS and lead laterals, all water issues, agricultural policy. We're doing all of it. And it's all done with people like you and Jenny and Tom, who basically volunteer their time and do really amazing things. Now, of course, we do that within the political process. And there was a little event yesterday that I'm sure you all know about. And I was just thinking to myself, I've never spent so much time in order to get so little to give to you in a speech. And the reason I say so little is a lot of things are up in the air still. But a couple of things we do know, and what I'm going to kind of start out at the national level first, is that it was a very, very unusual midterm election. During the midterm, the president's party always loses. And as a matter of fact, the Democrats did last night. They lost the House, or likely lost it. Again, a lot of this is up in the air. The Senate right now is kind of tied. Either you got it 50-50. The US Senate is 100. And right now it's 48-48, maybe. Could be 49-48, one way or the other. And it may be days or weeks before we're going to know. But the fact of the matter is that the party of the president in this case did not get clobbered. And we could sit and talk for the next 4 hours about why we think that. Names like Trump and issues like abortion and inflation and the economy. Many of these things played into how people are voted. But people are splitting their ticket, which is a really unusual thing. Wisconsinites tend to do it all the time, but it's happening nationally now. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's people are starting to just really try to gear their vote towards the person. And I think that's a good thing when it happens. For Wisconsin, Ron Johnson, our U.S. Senator, ran against Mandela Barnes. For right now, it hasn't been called. Johnson's up by about 30,000 votes. If it's within a 1% margin, it will probably be a recount. And there's still votes coming in. 1%, by the way, of 1.3 million. Hold it, no, it'd be 2.6 million total votes. So if it was less than 26,000 votes, that would be the difference. There could be a recount even in Wisconsin. There certainly will be recounts in other states. We know that, Georgia for sure. So the U.S. Senate is deadlocked. The U.S. House of Representatives, it looks like the Republicans gained some more seats and will probably be in the majority. But again, some of these races are out for recounts and are being recounted very slowly. So we don't know that yet, but that's what it looks like. I can tell you one thing we know. Tony Evers is going to be governor for the next 4 years. Mr. Michaels has already conceded, so the governor will stay on for the next 4 years. And it appears that Josh Kaul also won, although they're recounting some absentee ballots that were from Milwaukee, so it's likely Kaul would pick up more of those, but it's not solid yet. We know that the Republicans have picked up seats in both the Senate and Assembly, which would be, of course that happened because of the gerrymander that happened again in 2020. So this is the first year under the newly gerrymandered districts, and those are geared towards the majority party who wrote the maps, which would be the Republicans in this case. So the Senate has picked up one more Republican member. It now has 22 seats of the 33. So there's 22 Republicans and 11 Democrats. The Assembly, it's a little bit less clear, although they picked up seats, but it's less clear how many they picked up. So again, I'm kind of just like, it looks like it might be 64-35, but that could change one way or the other. Obviously, this election, very, very interesting time, but sometimes you got to step back and smile a little bit too. I don't know if any of you get the New Yorker, but Andy Borowitz is a satirist who writes for the New Yorker. And let me just read his 3-paragraph article from this morning, the headline of which is, USA, the envy of the world, after $10 billion in campaign ads, changes almost nothing. The United States of America has become the envy of the world after a $10 billion expenditure on political advertising changed virtually nothing. People around the globe marveled at democracy so robust it could withstand an outlay of cash greater than the gross domestic product of nations such as Tajikistan, Montenegro, and Somalia. In my country, I would worry that spending $10 billion on campaign ads would result in the entire government being ousted, a resident of Tajikistan said. But America is such a great nation that they can spend that much and results are barely detectable. When you imagine what you could do with $10 billion, you immediately think of building new roads and schools, a citizen said. But America's roads and schools must be in excellent shape if they can afford to spend $10 billion in elections instead. Anyway, I love reading his satirical articles. Jen, do I kick it back to you now, or do we open for questions? What's your call?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I was just going to close out with this ways to, I went back the wrong way. Ways to get involved with Green Fire here, just briefly. So we have, as I mentioned, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn that you can get plugged in and stay updated with us. You can become a member, and we do offer a free student membership, so you can visit our website and sign up for that if you're a student, and learn more about how to become a member with Green Fire there. You can get involved with any of our work groups. If you're interested in getting involved with the wildlife work group, you can send Tom or Adrian an email. And then we do have our annual meeting and 5-year anniversary celebration next Tuesday, the 15th, from 4 to 6:30. Registration for that is also on our website. We'll be highlighting different conservation successes we've had over the past 5 years, and have a couple ACP work group members as well talk about their experiences. You can sign up for our newsletter. So Green Fire has an e-newsletter that goes out monthly, and then a print newsletter that goes out 2 to 3 times a year. So you can sign up for that on our website. And there is our link to the website there at the bottom. So with that, we can open it up to questions. And if you have any questions to follow up, you can send us an email there with the address on the slide.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Jenny, Paul, and Tom, for that presentation about Green Fire's activities and about some partnership opportunities related to wildlife. It's great to hear all the work that you're doing. And so we do have a few questions in the chat that we can go ahead and get started with. And if anyone wants to add anything, please do put it in the chat and we will get to it. So the first question that I see is, why isn't lead in fishing tackle and bullets banned?
Tom, you might want to jump in too, but I quickly put in there, at least twice, possibly 3 times, bills have been introduced to ban lead. The reason is simply the legislature didn't have the will to vote those to do it. Many legislators are involved and have been involved in the past, but you got to get a majority vote, and for whatever reason, the legislature hasn't done it yet.
I'll just add, I guess I agree with Paul's assessment that I think, just simply put, it's just not legislatively feasible at the present time. But I do want to, I guess, indicate that there are a number of efforts that are going on in a variety of states. Minnesota has a Get the Lead Out campaign. There's a North American Lead Partnership Organization. There in Montana, there's a very good or excellent campaign going on, called Sporting Lead Free. All of these are using a voluntary approach, a combination of education, outreach. In some cases, like Minnesota, they've got some funding that allows for anglers to turn in their lead jigs and similar types of fishing tackle. So Greenfire has an interest in trying to see if we can get other conservation groups in the state to mount a similar kind of educational effort. I think we've got to really build the public support in order to enable, that's the starting place. We get sufficient public support, then the legislation will come, trail behind. But I mean, that's what we know right now.
Well, thanks so much for your responses to that question. So another question that I see in the chat is, what are the top wildlife issues that the Wisconsin Greenfire Wildlife Work Group will be focusing on in 2023?
Well, there'll be some that certainly carry over from our existing plate of work activities. So the wolf management plan is not finished. We anticipate, I believe yet this fall, that we will see a copy of the proposed next wolf management plan. So we will certainly be reviewing that and commenting on it. We will continue our work on Recovering America's Wildlife Act. The word on the street basically is that December 21 is supposed to be the date in which I believe the Senate will vote, hopefully affirmatively, on passage of RAWA. So then it would have passed both houses, and I guess the next step would be for reconciling any differences, but I guess that I don't think that's a big deal, and moving it on to President Biden's desk for passage. Our work then will turn to focusing on the implementation of the RAWA. So what does Wisconsin's investment plan for those dollars look like? And so we will be working again with other conservation groups to take a look at that and hopefully help guide things so that we make the best use of those dollars that are coming down the pike. There's some other sort of, there's a whole host of master planning plans that are sort of in progress. I get my terminology a little mixed up here, but there's a Central Sands, anyway, the ecological landscape that has the Sandhill wildlife area in it, and there's a little issue about what to do with the fencing on that property as it relates to chronic wasting disease having been discovered nearby. The master plans that for Rib Mountain State Park, I think has been released. We'll be commenting on that. And then there's the old bread and butter types of issues, the spring antlerless deer quotas and commenting on those. We participated on the department's advisory group for the 10-year CWD review. That group will be reconvened this winter, is my understanding. And so Mike Foy and Mike Samuel from our work group will be serving on that. The lead issue in wildlife is certainly going to get some additional attention. I don't know what other plans are sort of coming down the pike. It's a budget year, so certainly Paul and others from our organization are going to be following what happens in the budget, what joint finance is going to do. We'll be very concerned about anything that I think undercuts the department's ability to do the work that we need them to do. That's probably all I can bring up right now off the top of my head.
Well, and Tom, let's think about too what the Biden money the Biden billions, as it were, coming in over the next 5 years. These are things that he's already done, and it doesn't have to go through the legislature. He goes to Tony Evers. Tony Evers sends it to DNR. DNR asks Greenfire, what else should we do with this money? And I call it the Biden billions because it is billions of dollars. And we're going to be tapping into those for the next 5 years. In my mind, paradigm shifting amounts of money. Money that will actually be able to take care of things. I think many of you have probably followed legislative processes where a $250 million need gets $10 million. Wonderful, it's not going to do anything. This money is going to do things. And I think a great way, if you get involved with Greenfire, is you get to kind of tap into our access that we have gotten because of the Tom Hauges of the world and Jenny Washams of the world. We have access to groups and people that are making those decisions. So I'm looking forward to that. It's just going to be a lot of fun. We weren't talking billions of dollars before in my career. So let's spend a little money.
Yeah, to just build off of Paul's comment there, those billions, whether they were targeted for climate change capture, or perhaps dealing with having more of an agricultural focus, has
Right.
A tremendous opportunity to put wildlife habitat on the landscape, and benefit wildlife and also the other reasons, other objectives that people have.
And recall that a lot of the money is, 40% of this money is always set aside for communities that have economic issues. And it's really a good way for us to step up in the diversity and environmental justice area to help work on getting that money out to people that haven't been able to tap into these kinds of funds before, and start to get some of their issues addressed, because we have not done in the past a good job of it.
Well, thank you so much for your responses to that question. And so we had another question added to the chat back related to the topic of lead and fishing gear. And so the question is, while Greenfire generally works on the public policy side of things, do you engage with the commercial side of the equation? For example, working with a company like Bass Pro Shops to provide information on the impact of lead on wildlife and providing alternatives to lead-based fishing gear. They note that it's difficult to find alternatives, and they think that the technical expertise could have an impact on many customers if it was publicized with alternatives offered.
It's a great suggestion and a great idea. So we do have a proposed work plan on the lead issue. As I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we would like to start with is, number one, getting a coalition of conservation groups to come to the table and agree that the lead issue is something that we should all be putting our shoulders in on. The second step after getting that is working on a number of different platforms. One is just building a easy to use common website that, no matter if it's the Wildlife Society, Greenfire, Whitetails Unlimited, you name the group, we're all referring people to the same educational website that has the good information for whether it's anglers or hunters on the lead issue. But we also want to untangle what are the roadblocks that are preventing us from getting wider usage of non-lead tackle and ammunition in Wisconsin. Is it a question of production? Is it, so the Bass Pro Shops, or the people that are buying the tackle for Blaine's Farm and Fleet or Mills Fleet Farm, what would they tell us in terms of why they can't get more ammunition or why they don't stock more on their shelves? Is it a price thing or is it a supply thing? Those are questions that we want to get answers to. There is, I know myself, this past year, I've spent a lot of time looking at fishing tackle websites. There are a lot of providers for non-lead fishing tackle. It does tend to run a little bit more pricey, but they're available, and but a lot of anglers don't know about it, and a lot of anglers simply don't understand the connection between fishing jigs and loon mortality, or eagles, or any other sort of scavenger that incidentally picks up lead and then becomes poisoned, and an awful lot of mortality occurs as a result of it. So it's a great suggestion, and it's one that we have thought of. We hope to move forward on it in the coming year.
Well, thank you so much to all three of you for all your insight and for sharing about your organization and potential ways that our organizations can work together. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat, so I think we are going to wrap up today. We have our next Brown Bag webinar, our last one for the year, on December 14th. So I hope that you all will join us then. And thanks so much for joining us today. Everybody should have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks much, Allison. Nice to see